Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. She defended him. Not like, he's a decent guy, defended. Not even, he meant well, defended. Number. I mean, full volume, everyone goes silent, wineglass hits the table kind of defended. And I was still chewing when she did it. That's the detail I remember most. I had just taken a bite of penne, that moment when you're trying to twirl the pasta without slapping sauce across your shirt. That moment right before a man's reality implodes. I was still chewing. It was a dinner party. Her work people. 6 of them, plus me, the plus one, the husband, the outsider. They were all laughing at something, some joke about compliance risk that I didn't understand. Then one of the guys, I think his name was Wyatt, made a comment. It wasn't even that harsh, just a passing line about how Jasper keeps fumbling presentations. And there it was. Her chair scraped loudly as she leaned in, shoulders squared like a courtroom attorney, voice sharp and loud. Jasper's the reason this campaign is even still alive. If anyone deserves heat, it's leadership for not listening to him. Forks froze midair. Mouths hung half open. Jasper, the guy with the too skinny tie and nervous laugh, looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. And me? I was still chewing. Everyone stared at her, then at me, then back at their plates. And I thought, you've never defended me like that. Not once. Not even in private. Not even when it mattered. When the night was over, she clinked glasses with him. She hugged him tighter than she hugged me. She asked if he got home safe. She didn't ask if I was okay after the silence, after the shame. Back in the car, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stared at the dashboard clock ticking forward. She said nothing for most of the ride. Then she finally mumbled, "You were awfully quiet tonight." That's when I said it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just looked straight ahead and said, "You stood up for your coworker, not me." And that's when I knew something between us had snapped. She didn't respond. Just kept scrolling her phone, pretending like my sentence hadn't landed like a brick. But it did. It cracked something open that wouldn't close again. The next morning felt deceptively ordinary. She brewed her usual coffee, hazelnut, 2 sugars, no cream, and scrolled her emails while standing barefoot in the kitchen. I sat at the table, watching the steam rise from my mug, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Hey, about last night. Or maybe even a passive-aggressive jab. But no, nothing. Just silence. The kind that hums in your bones and lets you know it's not over. Not really. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for acknowledgement. For her to say, I noticed how that must have felt. But she treated my sentence from the night before, "You stood up for your coworker, not me," like background noise, a fly in the room, annoying but forgettable. And that bothered me more than the outburst itself. She left for work in a hurry, grabbing her keys off the hook, not even glancing in my direction. The door clicked shut. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do. I'm not the sneaky type. I never snooped through her texts or tracked her location like some paranoid sitcom husband. But something had shifted in me, something deeper than suspicion. It was a need to understand. I drove to her office building and waited across the street, feeling ridiculous, feeling pathetic. When I saw her car parked diagonally in its spot, I pulled in behind a nearby delivery van and walked over. I knew the code to her door. She never changed it. She said habits were efficient. I opened the passenger side and slid in, closing the door behind me. At first, there was nothing unusual, just receipts, gum wrappers, a travel-sized bottle of dry shampoo in the side compartment. Then, I opened the glove box. Inside was a small navy blue folder, plain, no label. I shouldn't have opened it, I knew that, but I did. Inside were printed slides from a recent pitch, one that she told me she wasn't directly involved with. Each slide had sticky notes in the margins, notes written in her handwriting and someone else's. I recognized her script immediately, sharp, looping letters. The other handwriting was slanted, almost artistic. On the last page, in a different pen, someone had written, "We make a great team. You really carried us this time. Let's celebrate soon." J. Jasper. My stomach turned, not from what was written, but from the way her response was scribbled right underneath his. "I owe you one, big time. Drinks Friday?" My treat. I stared at that sentence for what felt like forever. It wasn't definitive proof. There were no kisses, no confessions of love. Just drinks Friday. But it was the context, the tone, the comfort between them. The sort of ease she used to reserve for me before she began viewing me like a burdensome +1. I closed the folder and slipped it back exactly where I found it. I didn't take photos. I didn't confront her right away. I just sat in the passenger seat for a few minutes longer, letting the weight of it all settle around me. That evening, I cooked dinner. I didn't ask about her day. I didn't mention the folder. I wanted to see if she'd bring it up herself. She didn't. But when she excused herself to take a late Zoom call with the team, I waited 10 minutes, then checked her wine glass. Still half full. Uncharacteristic. She always finished it before heading upstairs. A detail so small most wouldn't notice, but I did. Because when someone starts pouring their attention elsewhere, they forget to finish the glass in front of them. Something was happening. I just didn't know how deep it ran yet. But I would find out. And when I did, it wouldn't be because she confessed. It would be because she got too comfortable forgetting I was watching. She'd always been meticulous about her phone, face down at dinner, always locked, always on silent. Not suspiciously so, just habitually. Efficient, she'd say. Everything about Noelle was efficient. Her life ran like an ad campaign, polished, timed, and curated. That's what made what happened next so strange. It was Saturday morning. I had just gotten back from the hardware store, carrying a bag with new screws for the squeaky cabinet she kept, forgetting to mention during her team calls. I walked into the kitchen, and her phone was buzzing wildly on the counter, a rare sight. And more importantly, it was unlocked. She must have forgotten to set the lock when checking her messages. It was sitting there like an invitation, glowing with notifications. And for the first time in our marriage, I listened to the whisper in my head that said, "Look, I told myself I wouldn't go deep. Just a glance. Just enough to prove my growing gut feeling was just anxiety. That I was imagining the space between us. That she really was just tired." I tapped the screen and opened her messages. At the top was a name I'd never seen before. JB, not Jasper, not Jaden, just JB. That's how she'd saved him. My chest started to tighten before I even opened the thread. And then I did. "Last night was perfect. You were perfect. When I'm around you, I feel seen. Not just supported, like I'm actually alive again. We probably shouldn't have, but I don't regret a second of it." And then hers. "I've missed feeling like me. Not someone's wife, just me." I froze. I reread that last line 3 times, and it hit harder each time. Not someone's wife. She didn't even say my name, just the title. The role she had reduced me to. A label that didn't even feel real anymore. I heard the bathroom door upstairs creak open, and panic snapped me out of my daze. I locked the phone and set it exactly where I found it. My heart was thumping like a hammer in a hollow room. I felt like a thief in my own kitchen. And in a way, I was. I had stolen the truth, pried it out from the one place she'd buried it too deep to face. She came down smiling, towel around her neck, wet hair, still glowing like nothing in the world had just crumbled. I poured us both coffee with hands that couldn't stop shaking. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't. She was busy texting someone, probably him, in her head while sipping hazelnut. We sat on the porch as if everything was fine. Birds chirping, neighborhood kids riding bikes. The world didn't know what I'd just read. It didn't care, and that felt like a betrayal all on its own. The sun was still shining like my marriage hadn't just slipped through the cracks of her screen. I didn't confront her that day. I wanted to, but I wasn't ready. I needed to see how far she'd go. If there was still a version of her that would choose me when it wasn't convenient. Spoiler, there wasn't. That night, as we lay in bed, her back turned to me. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every sentence of that conversation like a script I didn't audition for. She whispered something before drifting off to sleep. "Good night, babe." The word babe used to mean something. Now it felt like camouflage. That was the last night I slept beside her, with any hope left in me. And the beginning of something I never thought I'd become. A man quietly planning his exit, while the world still thought we were fine. I spent the next few days pretending to be the man I used to be. I got up at the same time. I made coffee like always. I kissed her forehead before she left the house, even though every part of me wanted to pull away. That's the thing they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't always erupt like a storm. Sometimes it's quiet, like holding your breath underwater and pretending you can breathe just fine. She said she had a business trip coming up. Denver, 3 days. Her tone was almost too casual when she mentioned it, like she'd rehearsed it in her head a dozen times before saying it aloud. She didn't ask if I'd miss her. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. She just said the dates, the flight time, and how she'd probably be too busy to talk much. I smiled and nodded like a well-trained background actor. That night, while she was asleep, I looked through her work calendar on the shared iPad. No mention of Denver, not even a block of time labeled off-site. In fact, she had a lunch meeting scheduled with Jasper the day she was supposed to be flying out. I stared at that entry for so long, my eyes began to sting. I made a decision. I wasn't going to ask. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to follow. When she left for the airport Friday morning, suitcase in tow and wearing a blazer she never wears on actual business trips, I waited 15 minutes, then got in my car. I didn't have a plan, just instinct and a need to stop pretending. I drove toward the airport, but she wasn't there. Her flight was supposed to leave at 11:30. By 12:15, I was still circling departures, and her name hadn't come up once on the display board. No flight to Denver, no delay, nothing. I called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Same thing. That's when I knew she wasn't flying anywhere. I drove back toward the city, not entirely sure what I was looking for, until I saw her car parked on a side street near an old boutique hotel she used to walk by when we'd visit downtown. I pulled over and just sat there, watching. The windows of the hotel glowed warm behind heavy drapes, the kind that shield secrets better than walls ever could. An hour passed. Then she walked out. Not alone. She was with a man in a dark pea coat. His hand was on her lower back in that overly familiar way. The kind that says, "This isn't the first time." They weren't rushing. They weren't hiding. They looked like 2 people who had already gotten away with something. I felt nothing and everything at once. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't take photos. I didn't scream her name or confront her in the middle of the street. I just watched the woman I had built my life around walk away like she hadn't burned the entire foundation to the ground. They went back inside. That was the moment I understood. She hadn't just made a mistake, she had made a choice. And I had been the optional footnote in her carefully managed narrative. I drove home in silence, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on your chest. I sat in the garage for over an hour, staring at the wall, wondering how long she'd been rehearsing this double life while I was busy fixing leaky faucets and remembering her coffee order. She came back Sunday night, hair freshly styled. Noelle had a story ready, something about delayed flights and no cell service. I nodded. I asked how Denver was. She smiled and said, "Stressful." That word stuck in my head, stressful, and all I could think was, no, Noelle. What you did wasn't stressful. It was rehearsed. It was easy, because I was the only one suffering, and she wasn't coming back. 3 days after her so-called business trip, we were invited to dinner at her boss's house. Some team-building thing, she said. I didn't want to go. Every part of me screamed to stay home and spare myself another evening of pretending everything was fine, while she played the role of successful professional wife with a loyal husband in tow. But I went. I went because part of me needed to see it all for myself. Who she was when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The house was massive, vaulted ceilings, abstract art, those absurd decorative bowls that served no purpose. Everyone there had that plastic kind of charisma, the smile with your teeth energy of people who practice mirror expressions before networking events. I felt like furniture. I stood by the island in the kitchen while Noelle laughed loudly from the living room, draped across the arm of a chair like it was her natural habitat. And then he walked in. Jasper, of course, tall, smug, overly confident. I recognized him from her LinkedIn page. She'd shown me a group photo once, pointing everyone out like chess pieces. She hadn't mentioned how often his name had started to come up lately, though, or how differently her voice sounded when she said it. They talked across the room with that particular tone, too casual to be professional, too comfortable to be platonic. I watched her touch his arm twice, small, quick, almost invisible gestures. But not to me. Nothing was invisible anymore. Someone suggested a toast, and glasses clinked around me. I held mine but didn't drink. I couldn't. My stomach was clenched so tight I felt like swallowing anything might betray me. Jasper made a joke, some inside reference to a client pitch gone wrong, and Noelle burst into laughter. Then she added something. I couldn't hear it all from across the kitchen, but I caught the end of her sentence. My husband tried to give input, bless him. Bless him? The room chuckled. And that was it. That was the final twist of the knife. Not just the lie, not just the performance, but the fact that she reduced me, the man who had stood by her through everything, into a punchline, someone to be pitied, dismissed. I excused myself. I stepped out onto the balcony where it was just cold enough to feel real. I stared at the city lights and realized something I hadn't admitted to myself until that exact moment. This woman didn't love me anymore. She loved who she had become without me. She loved the version of herself that existed in rooms I didn't belong in. She came out a few minutes later, arms folded from the chill. She leaned beside me and said, "Don't sulk." It was just a joke. I didn't respond. She sighed, louder this time, and added, "You're being weird tonight." That's when I turned and looked her in the eye, not angrily, not tearfully, just tired, and said, "You know what the difference is between you and me, Noelle? When I speak about you in a room full of people, I protect you." She blinked. No comeback. No sarcasm. For a brief second, I thought maybe something human would flicker in her expression. But she just turned away, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, and muttered, "Let's not make a scene." And just like that, she went back inside. But I stayed. I stayed on that balcony for a long time, letting the noise of the party drown behind the glass, letting the mask slip, letting the quiet truth settle into my bones. This marriage wasn't a marriage anymore. It was PR, a carefully maintained image, a social agreement. And I was the only one still holding on to the script, while she had already rewritten the ending. The morning after the dinner, she left early, saying she had a quarterly planning session with the regional directors. I nodded and wished her good luck, but I didn't mean it. I was past pretending now. Every word between us had started to feel like a transaction, like we were negotiating the terms of a fake peace treaty. I waited until I saw her car pull out of the driveway, then went upstairs to the home office, the one she used on remote days and locked every night like it held national secrets. But she forgot to lock it this time. I hesitated at the door for a long time. Part of me hoped I'd walk in and find nothing. Maybe I wanted to be wrong. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I was still worthy of some kind of trust, even if it was just in her paperwork. Her laptop was gone, but her desk wasn't empty. In the corner, beneath a stack of notebooks, I found a pale green envelope, no name on the front. Just the familiar handwriting she reserved for grocery lists and passive-aggressive notes about unloading the dishwasher. I opened it. Inside was a folded printout of a hotel confirmation. Not Denver, not even the city she told me about. It was a boutique hotel on the coast, 3 nights, king suite, ocean view, 2 guests, reserved under a fake email, but the billing address? Ours. She had used our joint credit card, probably assuming I wouldn't check the statement in time. Or maybe she didn't care anymore if I did. There was something else too. A second sheet of paper, folded tightly like a secret someone thought would never be found. It was a handwritten note on company letterhead, his handwriting this time. "Jasper, can't wait to wake up next to you without having to pretend we're just co-workers. Counting the days. Yours, Jay." I sat down slowly, the floor swaying under me like I was on a ship in a storm. I'd spent weeks chasing shadows, deleted texts, strange meetings, the energy shift. But this wasn't subtle. This wasn't coded. This was a man writing to my wife about mornings together and freedom from secrecy. I put everything back exactly the way I found it. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it yet. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out what came next. But more than that, I wanted to see how long she would keep lying when the truth was already bleeding out of every corner of our life. When she came home that evening, she kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted Thai or pizza for dinner. Her voice was light. Her makeup had been redone since work, which she never usually bothered with on long days. I told her pizza was fine. I smiled. I asked about her meeting. She launched into a rehearsed story about new budgets and some leadership retreat in August. I nodded at the right places. I even laughed once. And the whole time, I imagined that letter in the drawer, that room with the ocean view, that man writing to my wife like I was already gone. After dinner, she said she had emails to finish. I said I was tired and went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan and listening to the distant clicking of her keyboard downstairs. I wondered if she was writing to him. I wondered if he was typing back, smiling, imagining her beside him instead of me. That night, I realized something cruel. She hadn't just betrayed me, she had replaced me, and done it so slowly, so politely, that even I didn't notice it until it was far too late. She had kept my shell, but poured someone else's presence into it. And the worst part, she was getting better at pretending than I was. 2 days after I found the letter, she came home humming. Actually humming. I don't know if it was from guilt or euphoria, but she was glowing. Her hair was curled like she'd just stepped out of a salon, and she smelled like a fragrance I hadn't noticed before, something soft and unfamiliar. She didn't even comment on the fact that I was already at the dinner table, a full meal cooked, candles lit. We didn't eat together much anymore, so I figured I'd make it an occasion. "Wow," she said, setting her purse down. "This looks amazing. What's the special occasion?" "Noel," I said calmly. "Do you love him?" She froze mid-step, one heel still slightly off the floor, like even her feet weren't ready for that sentence. I watched her expression twitch in slow motion. First confusion, then denial, then fear, and finally, that cold mask she always wore when things didn't go her way. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to sound annoyed but failing miserably. I said, "Do you love him?" I repeated, gently pushing the wine glass toward her. "Because if you do, I'll leave the keys on the table, and you'll never hear another word from me again." She sat down, slowly, like her body was trying to catch up with what her mind was already screaming. I could see the gears turning. She didn't ask who I meant. She didn't ask what I'd seen. That told me everything. "You're being dramatic," she finally said, folding her napkin in her lap like we were about to discuss new curtains, not the death of our marriage. "There's nothing going on." "That's not an answer," I said. "That's a stall." She blinked, then looked down at her plate like it had something valuable to offer. For a second, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. Real, raw panic. Not because she was sorry, but because the game had changed. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't begging. I wasn't even asking her to stay. "I don't know what you think you saw," she started, her voice lower now, more measured, more PR polished. "But you're clearly misunderstanding. I saw the reservation," I cut in. "The one for 2 guests at the Coastal Hotel. I saw his letter. I saw your handwriting." She flinched barely, but it was there, and then she lied again. "It's not what it looks like." That phrase, that tired, worn-out sitcom line of a sentence. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because that was the moment I finally stopped being sad. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. I stood up slowly, pulled something from my pocket, and placed it on her plate. It wasn't a ring, it wasn't a note. It was the photo I'd printed of her car outside the hotel, time-stamped and real. "I just wanted to see if you'd lie to my face with this right in front of you," I said quietly. "Now I know." She stared at the photo, lips parted, no sound coming out. For once, the woman who always had a polished response had nothing to say. "I'm not going to scream," I added. "I'm not going to make a scene or throw your clothes out the window or text your mother. I just want one answer. Why?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the photo again. She blinked hard, as if maybe it would disappear. "I don't know," she finally whispered. "I was just tired of being who I was with you." That line didn't stab. It didn't even sting. It just echoed. "I guess I was tired of being who I was with you too," I said, stepping back from the table. But I didn't go looking for someone new to fix it. Then I walked away. No door slam, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. That night, I didn't stay with a friend. I didn't check into a motel. I sat in my car 2 blocks down the road and watched our bedroom window for hours. I don't know what I was hoping to see. Maybe regret, maybe tears, maybe her shadow pacing the room, realizing what she'd destroyed. But the lights went off, and nothing happened. That was the last night I ever looked at that house and thought of it as home. I didn't go back the next morning. I didn't send a message or ask if she was okay. I didn't wonder what she told her coworkers or whether Jasper called her with his "How are you holding up?" routine. I just started over, quietly and without apology. At first, I stayed in a short-term rental near the edge of town, one of those tiny places meant for visiting professors or traveling consultants. It was nothing special. The walls were thin, and the heating made strange noises at night. But for the first time in years, the silence inside didn't feel like judgment. It felt like mine. I stopped checking her social media. I stopped rereading her texts. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. Because I realized something one morning as I watched the sun rise over the parking lot. I wasn't the villain in her story. I just stopped fitting into the role she wanted me to play. And instead of talking, instead of reaching out, she rewrote the story without me. And that's okay. I hired a lawyer 2 weeks later. The process was less painful than I thought it'd be. No dramatic court hearings, no screaming matches, just paperwork, signatures, and the quiet unraveling of a contract that had long been emotionally void. And somewhere along the way, I started doing things I had forgotten I loved. I fixed old radios. I hiked before sunrise. I joined a book club at a local coffee shop and met people who didn't know me as Noelle's husband, just Dennis, just the guy who loved history and grilled cheese sandwiches and asked too many questions about World War II. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just walked out of the building and breathed deeper than I had in years. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning I didn't know I was allowed to have. Funny how life works. Noelle sent one last message a month later. Just 4 words. Do you hate me? I never responded. Not because I was angry, but because it wasn't my responsibility to carry her guilt. She made her choice, and I made mine. Now, I live in a small apartment with more sunlight than furniture. I wake up with peace instead of pressure. And most importantly, I've stopped being afraid of being alone, because being alone isn't the same as being lost. I didn't lose her. I found me.